do you do if you want to learn a language that doesn't use a writing system anything like English? Maybe you want to learn Arabic or Chinese that have totally different writing systems from what you're familiar with if you're coming from an English background. Or maybe the language that you want to learn isn't really written in any standardized way at all. Well, I've got some tips for you. So first off, most languages throughout most history are not written down. So the way linguists see it, the spoken language, or sign language in the case of sign languages, is primary, and writing is a derivative of that. And you can write a language in a variety of different ways. In theory, you could use any writing system to write any language. Though some writing systems are going to be better equipped for certain types of languages than for others. So that said, if you don't want to worry about writing and you just want to dive in with speaking, go for it. More power to you. Now, personally, I like writing and I'm a really visual person. It really helps me to see things written down and to be able to make notes to help me remember things. So if that's you, you've got some options. If your language has a writing system that just isn't like English's, you can work on learning that writing system and use that. In the meantime, though, you might want to use a writing system. You might just want to make notes just kind of phonetically in a way that makes sense for you. Now, if these are just your notes, you can write things in any way that you want to. Though I do have some recommendations that I would recommend being really consistent and using the same kind of writing each sound the same way, the same time. Writing each sound the same way every time. That will really help you. So you can just start using, English letters and letters that you're familiar with to spell things out the way that makes sense to you. That's great. One tool that you can also lean on is the International Phonetic Alphabet. So you might be wondering, well, what if there's some sounds in this language that we just don't have letters for in English? Well, linguists have come up with a system called the International Phonetic Alphabet. We just came up with a whole bunch of symbols for all the different sounds that you could ever possibly want to write. And so if you want, you can just invent your own symbols. That's what linguists do when even the International Phonetic Alphabet fails us. But you can also just use some of those International Phonetic Alphabet symbols. I'll include some links in the description. So you can go through, there's some great charts online where you can go through and you can click and you can hear what different each of the different symbols sounds like. So you can say, oh, it sounds like my language that I'm learning has a sound that's kind of like a B, but not exactly. You can kind of go to the B area of the chart, click around, find the one that sounds like your language, and then you can use that symbol. A lot of these are based on the letters you're familiar with, but with extra kind of hooks and lines and dashes through them. So that's something that you can do, and that can really help you to be consistent. Because, well, you've got 5 vowels, like 5 vowel letters in English, but what if you've got, your language has 7 vowels or 9 vowels? Like, how are you going to write those additional vowels? Well, the International Phonetic Alphabet has a lot more vowel symbols that you can draw from. You can also just come up with your own systems. You can write an A, and then you can write an A with a little hat or a slash through it. Maybe just make some notes so that if you come back later, you remember what you're indicating. So you can come up with your own or borrow from the International Phonetic Alphabet. This can be a really powerful tool. Again, this is just your notes, so just come up with a system that makes sense to you. Though if you work hard to make it consistent, I think that'll really reap benefits for you in the long run. Okay, so that's kind of the preliminaries. It's coming up with a system for your own use besides the language's writing system. Now, what about when it comes time to where you decide that you do want to learn a new writing system? How do you do that? First, I'm going to give a little bit of background on writing systems and then give you some practical tips. So there's 3 main types of writing systems that you'll encounter. Basically, in a writing system, you're connecting a symbol with some aspect of a language. And these systems differ in kind of which kind of piece of the language each symbol is connected with. So in an alphabet, that's the first type, each symbol represents one sound, a vowel or a consonant. So this is like what we're familiar with in English. It's not quite, English's alphabet has definitely some places where there's not always a one-to-one mapping. We've got silent letters. We've got sometimes use two letters to represent a single sound, like SH. But in general, we've got a symbol represents a sound. So that would be an alphabet. So other alphabets would be like Arabic or Hebrew or Thai or Korean. These are generally alphabetic-based systems. Even though they look really different than English, they work on similar principles. And honestly, a lot of these are that I mentioned are a lot more consistent than English, with less silent letters and such. Okay, so that's the alphabet. Another option is that you can also have one symbol for each syllable. So syllables, just a quick review, that's like if you clap the syllables, elephant. You've got elephant would be 3 syllables, elephant. Dog would be 1 syllable, dog. Librarian, 4 syllables. So anyway, you can have a writing system where each symbol represents a specific syllable. Now, as you can imagine, these types of writing systems, known as syllabaries, tend to have a lot more symbols because there's just a lot more syllables than sounds. The sounds kind of tend to be the more base level, and you can combine those in a bunch of different ways to create a bunch of different syllables. So something kind of maybe the most common example of this would be like, katakana or hiragana in Japanese are close to being syllabary systems where, there's a single symbol that represents, ka, and, a different symbol that represents, le, and a different symbol that represents, ta, and so on and so forth. And then you stick those together to make longer words and sentences. Okay, so that's a syllabary. A third type is a logographic writing system, where each symbol represents a word, or maybe a kind of meaningful unit in the language. So this would be what we find in Chinese, where a symbol represents kind of a meaningful unit, kind of a word, or at least a, sometimes also like a piece of a word. You might have a compound word, where kind of each half of the compound gets its own symbol. So that would be a logographic writing system. These tend to have many more symbols than any of the other two types. So just for reference, alphabet in English, we're able to get by with 26 letters. In a simple syllabary system like Japanese, they use about 46 symbols, depending on exactly how you count, to represent the syllables of Japanese. Japanese tends to have pretty simple syllables, so it's well suited for a syllabary. If you tried to come up with a syllabary for English, you need a lot more than that. You need well over 100, just because we have a wide variety of different shapes of syllables. But you could do it if you were motivated to do that. And then like in Chinese, a logographic writing system, you're going to need probably thousands of symbols to be able to write the language. Okay, so those are the 3 main types. I think a good starting point is just to identify which type it is. And as a refresher, you might have some alphabets that look totally different than English, but if they're using a symbol to represent a sound, they're still an alphabet, and there's going to be some similar principles there from what you're used to learning English. Okay, so you've got some options here. Like I said, you can just learn to speak a language and you can not learn to write it. Alternatively, there's going to be some people who want to focus on writing and learn writing first. Since most people, when kids are learning to write, generally they can speak the language first. There might be some ways in which knowing about the language will be helpful, and knowing some language might really help you in learning the writing system. But if you don't have, let's say you're taking a trip and you want to get prepared, learning a writing system is something that you can do to get prepared, where you don't need a lot of native speaker input. Like learning to practice, conversation can be hard to do just in your room by yourself. But learning a writing system is definitely something that you can learn by yourself. So how would you go about doing that? you've got a bunch of different options, kind of the same way that you would learn anything. I'd recommend kind of do a little bit every day. Kind of lots of little practice sessions tend to be better than one big one. Work on writing, practice writing the symbols and say them out loud, like say their names or their sounds out loud as you practice writing them. Flashcards, you can get a flashcards app. You can like make your own physical flashcards. You can draw pictures if that helps you. Like maybe you kind of like start off with a symbol and, maybe it reminds you of an elephant and you kind of draw out the rest of the elephant and you can kind of connect that with the sound or the name of the letter. That can be kind of another way to work on kind of learning, learning different symbols that are new to you. If you're learning a language like Chinese, a lot of the characters kind of have smaller pieces that get combined in different ways. So if you are learning Chinese, I'd encourage you to kind of learn a little bit about, they're called radicals, there's lots of information about them online, but learn a little bit about kind of the different pieces that go into those characters, because learning about those pieces can really help you. And I would just encourage you that writing systems can be really fun. They can also sometimes be intimidating. But remember that you don't have to learn a writing system to know the language. You also don't necessarily have to know the language to know the writing system. So here's just an area where you can lean into like your own personal preferences and what you like. Like you don't have to get pigeonholed into a specific way of doing things. If you want to just take notes in your own system and come up with something that works for you, like that's great. If you want to work on just speaking and not worry about writing for a long time, that's fine. If you want to work on learning writing kind of as one of the first things that you learn, and then work on learning speaking, like that can also be, that's a totally viable way to do it. So anyway, whatever your kind of personal preferences and strategies are, I hope this video has been helpful for you.